Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Today's episode is brought to you by the Athena Wellness Academy, your resource for wholehearted living. The Academy's featured offering is an online course called From Type A to Type B, How to Mindfully Descend the Corporate Ladder and Invite What's Next. This course is perfect for you if you're contemplating or navigating a professional transition, and it's available as a self-study or with a small cohort of students facilitated by me, Kathy Robinson. To learn more, I invite you to go to athenawellnessacademy.teachable.com or click on the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's episode is one that comes full circle. I initially reached out to our guest because of her early career choices, which seemed so different than my own and many of the people I know. But as we got into the conversation, we found more similarities than differences, especially how we've kept ourselves engaged and inspired throughout our lives. I'm joined today by artist Haden Starbuck, who has made her living outside of the standard 9-to-5 model as a creatrix for more than 25 years. She's also a creativity coach who helps others step into their creative flow. Here's what we cover: the decision to create work that aligned with Haden's desired lifestyle, Haden's artistic journey and current projects, the interconnectivity of creativity, inspiration, spirituality, and nature, the link between creativity and wellness, and how to welcome what's on the creative horizon. You can learn more about Haden at creatrixcompass.com, and I'll put a link to her website, her podcast, and the offer she mentions in the show notes. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy this inspiring conversation. All right. Haden, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kathy. It's such a pleasure.
So please share a bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh, I would love for that to be like this really easy question. It's like if you asked me this same question or any of these questions a month ago or a month from now, it might vary. So here's today's answer. I'm like this little hippie kid that loves to play in the woods who has to come out and socialize in the real world sometimes. And I love to create and be in my own headspace. And yeah, that's about it.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I can say we've never had that answer before on the Athena Wellness Podcast.
There we go. That's what I was aiming for.
You're uniquely you this month. That is good.
Oh, yeah.
When I read about you and what you do, I think the reason why I really wanted to have you on is because a lot of professional folks listen to this podcast and are not always enthusiastic about what they do for a living. And your professional life, you started it in a way that many, and I'm raising my hand here, who took a more traditional path, just marvel at. Like, you came at it early on, wanting to create work that aligned with how you wanted to live. And I think that's what people in midlife are doing now. Like, how do I really want to live? And they're answering those questions now, but you did it really early. So can you talk a little bit about those early formative years when you were trying to figure out what to do with your life?
Well, and I think too, especially after our little COVID break, I think a lot of people did reevaluate. What, am I on the right path? And we do that whole zombie thing where we're just going, and we don't stop. Even me, who's had a creative life, is like, whoa, let's rethink. Okay. There's going to be some correlation here and some crossover answers. I had a pretty free-form childhood. in nature as a little hippie kid.
Themes,
I
threads.
know there's total themes running through. And because I was an only child and I had a lot of time to myself in nature with animals, I think I got a pretty strong sense of who I was. So, yes, I did the required schooling, blah, blah, blah. But I think I was always looking for that element that felt like me, that made me happy. So instead of taking 10,000 required classes, maybe I took a woodshop class, or, I was just always looking for ways to fit into the system, but still be me, which I don't know. Did people lose that? Did they just go straight to the system and forget about themselves? That baffles me. I don't. It does not compute.
Yeah, I think you hit on an important point, that being an only child and having the freedom to go and do what your heart desired early on, a lot of folks are fitting into a family structure of some sort.
Ooh.
With some definition. And so, I mean, I grew up in a very urban setting. It was all concrete. So I couldn't have done what you did, right? Although I think where we align in a lot of ways, I was an only child in a way that my brother and sister were a generation older than I was.
Wow.
So even though I had siblings, I had a lot of that alone time. And so it's really interesting that we find ways to keep ourselves entertained, engaged, exploring when you're on your own. Then it's very different when you're in a family unit.
And I would even say, I mean, kids growing up now, I don't know, because ironically, I didn't have kids and a lot of my friends don't have kids. But I wonder if they're having even a childhood that even remotely resembles what we had, because we didn't have all the entertainment options that they had back then. It's like, here, I remember the thing I really wanted that my parents wouldn't get me was a pet rock. Do you remember those? They took like a rock and put googly eyes on it and sold them for, I don't know, some ridiculous amount of money. So, I mean, we grew up with rocks and sticks and, well, concrete in your case. But I would also like to say that I have lived both off the grid in nature and right in the bowels of Manhattan and other big cities. So it's not like I just went to the woods and never left. I do have a spectrum. I just prefer the woods, although I like to visit New York.
I'm curious, when you were in these more structured situations, so like early on in school, did you notice a difference of you felt one way out in the woods by yourself and you felt another way when you had to sit at attention? Like, what was that like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still do when I'm in a social situation. It feels like I have walls around me, or, inside me. Of course, I'm doing all my cartwheels and blah, 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 whatever. But I feel like how I present in the world has to be a certain way so that people will leave me alone enough so that I can just go be myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
I switched schools a lot when I was a kid. So I went from a school that was really freeform, like I was, to a public school where I was bullied. Maybe because I'd had that free form, I had my own mind. I don't know. That's whatever. But so I think I learned to just fit in enough so that I could go be me.
There's less friction when you do that.
Yes, I'm looking for less friction. Absolutely.
So you came through the school system, went to college.
Yeah.
And so tell me about this. Okay, now it's time. Everybody's saying, okay, you've grown up. It's time to do something in this world. What happens?
Oh, no. See, I grew up with a father who said, you don't have to grow up. Okay. Well, let's just strike that particular sentence. Yeah, I mean, it was important. My mom was just like, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. But there was no pressure to be a banker or a lawyer or whatever. It was just get an education. That was basically it. So once I got there, I just looked around for what was fun, and I experimented a lot and ended up in art because the artists looked like they were having the most fun. But I didn't fully commit. I did like an art history, art combo package. And then once I got out of school, it was like, oh, forget, let's just do art.
So, okay, you're done with school. It's time to go out on your own. Most people find an established job. What was your thought process?
I haven't had one of those yet.
I know.
And I'm in my mid to later 50s. I don't think I will at this point. I think I might be doomed to live this life. I ended up moving to a small town where there weren't really a lot of those kind of jobs anyway. I mean, I could have stayed in Manhattan because that's where I graduated from high school. I always wonder how different my life would look if I had. But no, even there, I was doing photography and I would have gone a different route, I'm sure. I just don't see myself fitting into that structure of traditional work, let alone 40 hours a week. That's exhausting.
40 hours sounds pretty good to me, actually.
Oh, but how do you get home from like giving your heart and your soul to someone, to a corporation, to whatever, and have time to be you? I mean, remember, I'm still that little kid that inside is like, wee, and outside is trying to fit in and trying to find the balance between that. So luckily I ended up in a small town, lots of, part-time seasonal work for the most part. And yeah, I mean, the demands from the outside world weren't that big. So I just very slowly I've been here 30 years, over the last 30 years of just wandered from medium to medium and creative adventure to creative adventure and all those other things that happen in life along the way.
So it was more of a process of elimination. Like you knew that you didn't want to get a structured job.
True.
But did you graduate college with a particular medium that you were working in? Like, how did you support yourself?
Yeah. Both my parents, even though they had creativity in their life, they both basically had desk jobs at that point. And I just knew the one thing I did not want to do was a desk job. Yeah, I looked around and I was doing some artist modeling because I'd drawn from artists or drawn from models in school. And I thought that would be interesting. It's like you get to meditate, get paid. So I looked around at the people that were drawing me and I thought, wow, they've got a great life. It's midweek, they're drawing an artist. I want to do that. And then I realized they were all older. They'd all had careers. They had already done it. They'd done their time. So somewhere in my 20s, I decided to be semi-retired. Ask me in my 90s if that was a good plan or not. I don't know. But I've lived most of my life that way. And how do I pay for stuff? I don't need as much as most people do. And I'm also incredibly fortunate. Somehow I own land. I own a house. I own a car that runs at the moment. It's kind of like a value system. It's like, what do I really want? I don't want 2.5 cars. I don't want to live in suburbia. I don't want to live in the heart of a big city. I want to live in nature. I'm okay if I don't have the best of everything. And part of creativity is sort of taking a minimal amount and making it just magnificent.
So the creative process extends far beyond just the artistic.
Yeah, it's how you live. It's how you create anything is how you do everything. I mean, who you are is who you are.
Yeah, and I think that was my original question, that you created work that aligned with the way you wanted to live, that aligned with your values. So you did have a strong sense of what you wanted, more importantly, what you didn't want. And then the rest of the stuff seemed not as important.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do with my days? It's like, well, I want it to be creative and I don't want it to be inside. And that was kind of the thought process, if I'm following you.
I think you're giving me way too much credit. I don't know that I specifically thought about, because see, the way your brain works is you set, I'm assuming you kind of set a goal and you kind of work towards that. I'm like that free, shiny object. Shiny object. I like wander paths and just see where they go. And eventually it all knits into this big tapestry of life that, yeah, I've been free forming it for a while.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about, you call your work and yourself a creatrix. Tell us a bit about how that came about, what that is. And while I know that a day in the life is not, there's no typical one, just a bit about how your days are structured, how you go about life.
So Creatrix came about because my business card wasn't big enough. I was working in so many mediums and selling them professionally. And at some point you can't list everything on your business card. So I just put Creatrix, Haden Starbuck, Creatrix. And one, it gave me kind of professional permission to do whatever the heck I wanted. And two, people really liked the word. It was a word they hadn't seen a lot. So there we go. Within that, I can do anything, which is fun. It's nice to give yourself that permission. A day in the life. There are definitely rhythms. I always have a dog, so the dog gets me out and going and walking, because I can be a couch potato as much as the next person. It's not like I must be in nature, but I must to feel really good. I must do that. So a lot of time in nature. The creativity can be anything from cooking to conversations with friends. There's creativity in the day for sure. If I have a deadline and I have to get some work done, then I will do that, which is fun. And then I'm just nose to the grindstone, head down, the rest of the world vanishes, and I check off all my boxes.
So what are those deadlines? Like, how do those days differ then from the more free-form days? So if you've got something that you need to deliver, do you get very methodical that way, or is it just more disciplined wandering?
That's a really good point. I think that I wander so much in my other life because when I'm working, I'm working. So I might work a 14 or 18-hour day just because I'm really into it. And if it's going well, don't mess with it, If you're having a good solder day, solder. So, and there's some fun and accomplishment in that as well. I like the little pats on the back. It's like, I did that.
So you ride the wave.
I ride the wave. Nice. Yes, I like that.
You're a surfer.
That's it. I'm sitting in the ocean waiting for waves.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not a water baby, but I'm sitting in the ocean waiting.
By the time we're done, we are going to define your life. You've been waiting decades for this.
Where have you been all my life? This is great. Surfing.
You talked about working in many mediums. Can you give us an example of, is it fiber? Is it jewelry? Is it painting? And it's probably yes to all of it.
Yes, to all of those. My first medium as a kid was, I love to sing, but I gave that up because someone told me I couldn't. And I'm someday going to go back and prove them wrong, whoever they were. I don't know who they were. I did a lot of writing. Always loved, only child, right? You got to talk to someone. So I did a lot of writing. My dad gave me my first camera when I was, I don't know how old. So I'd wander through nature with a camera. And guess what? When COVID hit, what did I end up doing? All those things I did as a child. Wander through nature with a camera, blah, blah, blah. So after that, I really got into painting in college. That seemed to be the thing that drew me. And that's part of why I ended up where I am now, because I just wanted to go paint in the woods, and there were woods here and I could do that. Then I discovered basket weaving, and I thought, God, how cool is it that you can make something? I've always enjoyed containers. I don't know. I love the idea that you make something that people put things in that holds space, I guess. Ironically, most of the people that have my baskets, they're just adornments, but there you go. So I had a lot of fun with that. And then I felt like I kind of plateaued. Oh, and then I discovered silver, and people pay more for silver than they do for twigs. Go figure. Same amount of time, same amount of energy, but they will pay you more. So the little mercenary takes over. Rocks have been a huge part of my life since I was a kid. We can blame that pet rock.
Pet rock, yeah.
Thank you, Dad. No, I've always loved rocks, going to the beach, that sort of stuff. So I started making jewelry with the rocks. That's the whole reason I learned silversmithing, was to get rocks on my body. And then, I was at who knew this was going to be such a long answer? I was at a show, because it's hard to come up with shows in the winter. It was called Alpaca Palooza, and it was all alpacas. So I ended up trading some alpacas for some jewelry. And then it was like, oh, well, I got to make something from the fiber. So then I became a fiber artist. Alpacas, llamas, fiber goats. I now have my first sheep. I just keep wandering, painting, photography, collage. I'm really enjoying that now. Now I'm thinking about getting into woodworking and furniture building. And I'm just trying to think of what I can do with the resources on my land. For instance, silversmithing. Silver is a refined metal. Maybe not the thing I want to do with the planet, So how do I want to be in a relationship with the planet? but still be creative. So I have a lot of wood. It falls out of the sky constantly. What can I do with it? So that's what I'm dabbling with at the moment. We'll see.
I'm still thinking about this as an amazing journey. But at the beginning, you had to find folks that were interested in buying what you were making. So how did you do that initially? Because that takes some chutzpah, right? Of how do you go about, you seem like the anti-marketer. So how did you go about finding a place for your work in the world?
There are well-worn paths, and I just stuck my caravan in line with everybody else. Art shows, museums, galleries, I am not the first person who did it. So I just looked at how other people did it. I spent a lot of time surfing people's websites. The kind of surfing you can do while dry on land. And just saw what they did. And so the people I admired their work, it's like, what shows are they in? Okay, I'll apply for those shows. I need professional photos. Okay, I'll go do that. So just one step after another of kind of looking at who you liked I don't know their lifestyle because I can't go that deep into their lives, but on the surface, you liked the look of what they were doing with their lives. Mimic.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. You mentioned before this, you can be riding these creative waves. What part of that is inspiration and what part of that is just being locked in the creative process? Like, what does that mean for you? Or is there a differentiation?
Oh, absolutely. I think the inspiration is that free floaty part of me. I'm just kind of wandering around looking for inspiration and maybe not looking, but being open to it. It's like I get my best ideas when I'm doing nothing. I'm walking in the woods and my brain is listening to birds or whatever. So I think that's a huge part of what's going on with me right now. I'm kind of waiting for that next wave. That's the inspiration. The creativity for me is what I do with it, or even that I recognize that it is something I want to do.
What are those whispers like? Because I'm guessing that it's more of a feeling.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it could be one that passes, and sometimes it could be one that's a little bit more adamant that
Yeah.
you listen. So what's that like?
Yeah, sometimes it's yelling. I will hear this really distinctive voice that's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And other times it's like little whispers on the wind. And a lot of times I'll sit with something for a while and I'll imagine it all the way through to see if that's the life I want. And a lot of times that's enough. That was fun. It's kind of like a lucid daydreaming, active daydreaming where I try like a buffet or an improv. I try on a costume of what I think that would look like and decide if it's really a path I want to walk down. I guess you go a certain way until you don't.
It's like dating the muse.
It's dating the muse while riding waves.
See, now you know why you're so tired sometimes. Like there's a lot going on.
And I would like to do a plug for naps at the moment. You feel and you are in a place where you can nap, by all means. Yeah. Yeah. Being open. I actually have on my computer, it says divine receptivity. It's like just hanging out and waiting for the universe to say, hey, do this, woman.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned divine receptivity. I love that phrase. And my next question was going to be, what role does spirituality have in your creative life? So you've talked about nature, you've talked about inspiration. Is spirituality different in some way, or is it all the same energy?
There are times when I definitely think I put it in a separate place, but no, I think it's the same for me. I don't know how it is for others, but especially when you're dealing with nature and I mean creativity. Hello, that that's about as spiritual as I can imagine getting. Also grew up without religion, so I don't know, how that all works in most people's lives. But yeah, it feels I'm meditating and I get to this place where it's just this high or this bliss. That's exactly the same feeling I get when I'm creating. It doesn't, and you mentioned feeling earlier. Yeah, totally. How does it feel? Feels the same, feels good. Do it.
Good. Awesome. I've heard you speak about a current nature project that you're working on where you, and I'm quoting, co-creating with your property. And I am really curious to dive into this of what is it? How did it come to be? And where are you?
Yeah. So I have lived on this land for 20 years, but I've been the last 10 until COVID. I've been so busy just kind of like earning a living, blah, blah, all that normal stuff. And there was something about really just the lockdown. I mean, I had to just be here. And luckily I had lots of land. So I never was lacking being outside. And I just started seeing the land in different ways. And I have enough of it that parts of it I'd never even been to. Just we have brush. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. We have brush. You can't walk through it. Although I've had a lot of help from my fiber animals. Thank you guys. I just started having a conversation with it, I guess, is probably the best description. And it became this big player in my life. I'm having a relationship with my land. But I'll walk around and I love, one thing that happened is they're putting in a huge building development next to me. And that had been where I'd been hiking all these years, the last 20 years. So I need hiking trails. I just need to, but I also need to be someplace where I don't have to pay attention to my dog and if he's interacting with someone's horse or whatever. So my my property's fenced and I just started building trails. And that started with that. And then I'm looking at areas and going, oh, that'd be a nice place for a sculpture. And like a sound garden would be good here. All these ideas pop into my head, inspiration as I'm going, and then I make them happen. And I'd gotten to the point because I do in my professional work, I was working fairly small, and I'd gotten to the point where I wanted to work really, really, really big. Well, hello, you can't get bigger than a bunch of land. So that's just I'm letting it flow at its own pace. It's probably going to be a project I work on until I die. And I'm just loving the heck out of it. It just feels like every day I see something. Like right now, it's just started raining. All these mushrooms are coming out. So I'm taking photos and I had a ton of tree frogs this summer, way more than usual. And I'm just inspired by that, So I'm building myself an oasis.
So is it like an Andy Goldsworthy kind of thing where you're...
I have one thing that I'm doing from one end of the property to the other because I'm in the trees. So we get all this slash that just falls out of the woods down onto the ground. So instead of just piling it in humps, I'm now making a long, like they have in New York at Storm King, I think it is, one of his walls.
That is correct. Yes. I've been there.
Only I'm doing it out of slash. So it's, like twigs and branches and blah, blah, blah. So it's also, it's providing a wall and a break in the property, but it's also providing habitat for critters. And I'm in a mossy area. So it becomes this big moss laden thing. So it has a life of its own. One of my favorite Andy Goldsworthy things is the mud projects he does where things change over time. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this does. It's like I build it up because everything's green and then it slumps down as it decomposes and then more things fall. And it's alive. I'm working with something that's alive and surprises me and is ever changing, which is it's just the best thing ever.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. I mean, that's really the relationship, right? And then it's also a mirror back at you. That as the land is changing, so are you. And as that connection, well, it's not about the moss or the decay. Like I wasn't, now that I'm saying it, I wasn't making that connection, but it's more of the ever-changing presence that we are on this physical plane, right? And as is the earth, and we don't notice that. And the fact that there's this pause, it's almost like this active meditation and this active conversation that you're having, which I think is just really beautiful. And that it came out of something that was a time that was very destructive for many. And here you're creating connection out of that, I think is really, there's something to that.
And it was destructive for me. I mean, I lost all my income streams in 1 week. It's like gone. But I think because you mentioned mirroring, I think the thing that's so exciting is I'm moving slower than I used to. I know that doesn't sound exciting, but I like that I'm there's just more space in my life and my brain and my body, and that's kind of how I'm working with the land. It has its own rhythm, and so I think I'm adjusting to its rhythm as opposed to with other mediums I work in. I can make it do this and do that. I can go at a speed that, unless it's a really good solder day or a really bad, you know what I mean? I can kind of control the environment. I can't do that with nature. It is truly, it's co-creating at its finest at this point.
And it's interesting that it's been infused and you feel that in other areas of your life.
Oh, yeah.
It's slowing down, that deepening, that rootedness that you're working through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and yeah, I actually ended up getting a part-time job. Thank you, COVID. And same thing. It's like I take how I feel in nature into that workspace. And it's like, if that doesn't feel good, what can I do inside myself, or what can I do in the work itself to, at least, I don't expect it to be exactly like working in nature, but to get it to feel good enough so that it's not disrupting when my time is off. I don't want to take it home, basically. So I've been doing a lot of internal work as I work for other people.
It's interesting because, I came to this conversation thinking that this was going to be a completely different perspective for folks. But I think what you're really good at doing is articulating the things that we may do more of in the professional world to be able to keep that sanctity of space, whatever it is for somebody. For some people, it might be creativity. For other people, it may be family. Maybe it's a relationship, whatever that might be. But there is that way of protecting what it is that is sacred for that person.
And nurturing.
Yes. And I don't think we think about it that way. And I think a lot of the burnout is when we get disconnected from what that thing might be. And that's what it is that causes the exhaustion. It's not people think it's the pace and, the pressure and the stress. What's causing the stress, I believe, is the disconnection from that thing. But to be able to put words to it and to know that intuitively early on, I think is what really is the gift that you're bringing to the listeners of, like, it is very possible to build a life in a way that you're aligned, and you're still learning how to do that. I think that's what's so amazing. Like your land is teaching you how to take that even further, right? And that's what the journey is all about, which I think is really lovely.
Well, and I feel too that I have a bit more consciousness around it than I have at other times. I think I was given an incredibly good start, but now it's almost like I'm mature enough to get it. And I just want to address stress really quickly, because that is a huge reason of why I do what I do and why I am who I am. I don't do stress. I've created a life that is, and there are stresses, of course, but I've created a life that's as stress-free as I can make it, because that's not healthy for me. What stress looks like to me, well, one, obviously it ends up in your body, but you can't turn off the mental chatter. If you're taking that home, when you're in that beautiful place where you're happy and the thing that you really love and want to nurture, that's not healthy.
Mm-hmm. But it almost feels like there's a very intentional threshold that you cross to leave the outside world outside and to be in this inner world. Or am I giving it too much? Am I projecting?
Yeah, it really depends on what the thing is. For the most part, yeah, I probably am pretty good about keeping that separate. But there are times when stuff pops up and it just gets in my head. Meditation's huge for me. Walking, being in nature, snuggling with my dog, playing, anything. And there's where creativity is so good, because it takes you out of whichever part of your brain chews on things. It relaxes, but it's not just relaxing, it releases. There we go. It's good at releasing stuff. And actually that's part of why I've been doing collage so much lately, is it's a way to, anything that is really bugging me, I take it out of my body and I put it into artwork. And then I can release it. I could burn it, I could sell it, whatever. But it's a really good way to just kind of cleanse your palate, I guess, and let it go. Because that's probably where a lot of my stress comes from, is not letting stuff go. If I'm in a job I don't like, why am I still there? Am I beating myself up about it? I create a lot of my own stress. The job didn't create the stress. I created it for myself. So how do I do that? A lot of inner work.
Yeah. And is it something like when you can feel that build and okay, it's time to sit down, or like, how does that naturally happen? So like for a lot of people, like for me, running was my thing, was my outlet. And I knew like I was going for a run because you can feel it and it's that release. Is it something similar where like you just know it's time to sit down and not do something that is for art for professional reasons, but just art for release reasons? Or does it just kind of happen more spontaneously?
I never really thought about it. I might have to get back to you on that one. Yeah, okay, let's take a divorce, for instance. I do feel like it gets to a point, but maybe my threshold's a bit, because I've created this life that's pretty damn good. Maybe it's when it gets to the point where I have to do something to get it out, then I've gotten pretty deep into it. Then we have problems. But yeah, I think for me, it's just letting that release valve, just letting off little bits before it gets to that. God, gotta have your release valves, whatever they are.
Indeed.
Whatever they are.
Indeed. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to know, maybe you don't know the answer to this, but what's on your creative horizon?
Yeah, definitely the property. And I'm looking for my next business. I still have a lot of jewelry supplies. I still have a lot of fiber. I still have a lot of fiber animals. So there's going to be some of that. But yeah, I'm giving space for something new and exciting. And it hasn't quite, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's slowly, stories. That's right. Because I now have 1 sheep, 1 goat, 1 dog. The alpacas and the llama live with my ex. So I'm thinking about doing stories and drawings and photos of kind of our crazy little life. My Facebook page is public, so feel free to go see all the frogs and whatever. I've just been getting such a good response from family and friends about, I have this really unusual life. So I'm thinking about stories, whether they're geared towards kids or what, I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that might be, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm open. I am divinely receptive.
It's incubation time.
It is total, and this has been a long incubation time, longer than most. But why not? What else have I got to do? This is life. I'm living.
Lovely, lovely. So tell people how they can find you, what they'll find when they get there, and anything else you'd like to share with the listeners as we wrap up.
Creatrixcompass.com. My name is Haden Starbuck. Probably Google any of those and come up with good stuff. I have a creativity podcast, which your fine podcast host at the moment is about to be on my podcast in just an hour or so. For some weird reason, today is podcast day for the two of us.
It's a podcast extravaganza day.
Oh, these little serendipitous things just delight me. So it'll be fun. We're going to turn the tables.
We're riding the wave.
That's right. We're riding the wave. So I have a podcast called The Curious Creatrix. And what else? Oh, on the website, there is, if you do want to dabble in your creativity, there's a prompt a day to kind of get your creative juices going. It's called the Awaken the Artist. Just these goofy little things that just sort of remind you that you're a creative person, and then it doesn't take much to tap back into that and to just basically invite the muse to come play with you. That's all you need to do.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much, Haden, for your time. It's been a really lovely conversation. Appreciate it.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.hadenweb.com. www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.